Okay, let's go ahead and get settled. Or rather, get seated. That's not like, come on, settle down, everybody. Rah, 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 rah. Thank you for staying with us for session 2. It is the exact same session, but we know with fresh questions as we hear from Marous Brothers about our work with Cathedral Hall. We are pleased to welcome back Carter Edman, who is the Director of Design. I'm like, okay, Director of Design. This is right after church, so of course my IQ drops by about 20 points while I wait for it to come back. And Doug Giebel is an architect, and Stacey Trsek. Sharon, I'm sorry, Sharon Trsek. No, my apologies. Is the architectural historian, and we at Trinity have lots of history to dig into, and so we're so grateful that they are here. And I'm going to step out of the way so that they can go and get started. So there's plenty of time for your questions. Welcome to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this mic working? Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you for coming out on this lovely morning, and thanks especially to those who came to the town hall we did a couple months ago. That town hall, the first town hall we did, was really about listening and hearing everybody's thoughts and feelings and concerns about Cathedral Hall, and preparing us to do a lot of the design and investigation that we're going to present today. So what we're going to see today is it's in progress, but it's how we have tried to incorporate all of that feedback into developing a design for a renewal of Cathedral Hall. I don't usually like to read PowerPoint slides, but I do want to pay special attention to the value proposition. And this is something that the group collectively came up with together as we started this design endeavor to set the values and to set the kind of the high-level vision to guide us and also to hold us accountable to what we're trying to develop here. So I'm going to read these because I think it's important. To renew the beauty and functionality of Cathedral Hall, making it into a welcoming, accessible space that is used and loved by the congregation and community. To create a civic beacon of Christian compassion and service in the city. To respect the history, architecture, and integrity of Cathedral Hall. To work together as one team toward a common vision. And to do all this while making wise, responsible choices with respect to budget, schedule, and quality. So I don't think any of that's too controversial, but that's sort of the guiding principles that have led us to this point, and we hope we're going to lead us further as we continue to develop this and turn this into a real project. Obviously, the legacy and the history and the architecture that you have are highly valuable and really important. And I want to thank Sharon for all the work she's done to investigate that history. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to talk about that a little bit.
Is this working?
Yeah, but make sure you speak into the mic when you're turning. Okay.
All right. Hello? Can you? Okay. Trinity's history is much broader than what I'm going to focus on. I'm only focusing on what would be the third place that you had worshipped, first being a log cabin, then your first church, which burned, and then you have Old Trinity. Old Trinity was located on Superior near Bond Street, which is now East 6th Street. That would serve your church for nearly 50 years. And it was during that time that you became a cathedral. You were in discussions to become a cathedral. You started your food ministries and mission work. Then in 1890, we had started to discuss your cathedral and hired the architect, Charles Schweinfurth. That was also the same time that your Bishop Leonard was presented that Trinity could become the cathedral for the diocese. In 1894, the architect was directed to complete working drawings for the chapel and parish buildings that are on this campus. And by July of the next year, those buildings were built. You still had Old Trinity, so you had an uptown and a downtown place of worship at that time. Old Trinity was also put on the market in 1893, and it would stay on the market for 9 years before it sold. This is your rendering, initial rendering that was featured in Architect in the Inland Architect and News, and it shows the cathedral as proposed by Schweinfurth and the plan. And you can see in the plan above how the chapel and parish house correlate or connect. You still see remnants of Old Trinity in your music room upstairs in the tracery window. That's the stonework. And this is the exciting part. The windows that are in Cathedral Hall, I literally took a photo off of your walls, and I got permission to do that, and scanned it high resolution and was able to determine that it is absolutely the exact stained glass that was in Old Trinity. So that's really neat. It was made in Munich, and there's even information about the donors who were members of the parish. Okay. So you sold Old Trinity, or you knew it was for sale, and Schweinfurth needed to do an addition because parish house and, at the time, the chapel were not built to accommodate service, but they needed to be because you guys had no home for 5 years until your cathedral would be finished. So Schweinfurth designed an extension, which he referred to as the Perry Street Chapel, because East 22nd was Perry Street at the time. And you can see some of the details. It also helps, this architectural investigation helps our team from the design and construction side to just understand how things were built, when things changed, how things were modified, and how they correlate to the overall plan. So here's some elevations done by Schweinfurth. The cloister, these were the partition walls that would have folded back. So this would be looking towards Parish House from Cathedral Hall, where you've got the door in the middle right now that backs up to your kitchen. It used to have 5-panel doors, and they would bifold and fold back into pockets on either side. That was your original chapel. That is what it now looks like after the addition. So you can see how substantially large it got, and you could also see how those doors would have communicated with this room to allow for more space during service. Your cloister also extended. And then also I just want to point out the windows in the chapel were very plain. They weren't the diamond pattern windows that you see today.
And there was no door.
Oh, and there was no door. Yeah, this is not the elevation to show that, but yes.
Oh, okay.
There was no door to the garden in the original chapel until the 60s. So that's when a different architect was involved, Travis Gowan Walsh. He and the Briggs family, Travis Gowan Walsh was also a parish member at Trinity. I should start with that. So he worked with the Briggs, who were also parish members, and they donated paneling and doors from the Briggs Mansion, which was a Schweinfurth-designed home in Cleveland Heights, to the cathedral, for Cathedral Hall. He also did the windows that you see today, which are the diamond pattern with the interesting color pieces mixed in. That's Travis Gowan's input, or
his work.
Yeah, his work. So trying to understand the different layers of the renovation. And then we also had the Elizabeth Ring Mather garden improvements that were done at that time by her son and his wife in her memory. So when the chapel was first built, it was actually used by Grace Parish while their church was being renovated. So, and then coincidentally, after your cathedral was completed, the pews and altar were donated from Cathedral Hall to Grace Church for their use. During the Depression years, 1932 is when it started. You had a program that was really, really wonderful, and it's speaks to your service to the community. People couldn't afford entertainment and any kind of extra fun. And so Trinity came up with a program, and it was very popular. 300 people initially came. It was on Fridays and Sundays. It was a entertainment-focused event. It started with singing. They had you had a strategic partnership with the Cleveland Orchestra, so they would do musical performances. You had a strategic partnership with Cleveland Museum of Art. They would do some art exhibitions. You had a strategic partnership with the Cleveland Institute of Art. They did still drawing classes. You also did a strategic partnership with 52 or 3, I can't remember, over 50 grocers, florists, and restaurants in the area so that people had food. And they would leave with flowers and food and sometimes even toys. So that was great. Fenn College used Cathedral Hall. And you had a former choir boy who became a bishop. And he came back and did your commemorative service in 1967, right after the renovation work was done, to celebrate the anniversary of the 65th. I also studied the chapter room because there were some modifications in there with the windows. Again, that Schweinfurth influence. It originally had a very plain 1/1 simple clear glass window so you could see into the space, and you'll recognize that table is in Cathedral Hall. The chairs are, I think, in your basement. But it's understanding the space and how it's changed through time so that we can then consider our next steps. I'm going to turn the mic over because I promised not to talk very long.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sharon. And I'll tell you, she did a lot more research than what she was able to share today, and it has really informed how we're approaching the facility. And I want to talk about Cathedral Hall today, where it's at, what its potential is, what the limitations are. Cathedral Hall it's a beautiful architectural space, right? You don't get spaces like that very often, and we don't get them today, and it's a beloved space. It is also very much underutilized, and I would consider it sort of a hidden gem. Even when you're here on campus, it's kind of hidden, right, from like where we are now. Tremendous potential. Also a lot of challenges. And I'm sure you could rattle these off yourself, but probably primary among those challenges is the lack of adequate climate control. So that's paramount to be addressed. Access and wayfinding. How do you get there? If you're driving here, if you're walking here, if you're taking the bus, if you're already here, how do you get over there? Lack of connection to the rest of the campus. There's a need for flexibility of that space for different uses. There are some food service challenges, which we can talk about. The back of house space, and now just for reference, when I talk about the back of house space here, I'm talking about the area to the east of Cathedral Hall where the kitchen is and the parish house. Acoustics and lighting could be improved. Storage needs, particularly table and chair storage. I'm not going to get into a super amount of detail on all of these things just because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So if there's anything you want to go into more detail about, you can ask it during Q&A or even come up afterwards. Because we do have a lot to share. So this is obviously the first picture from the first town hall we did, and I want to talk a little bit about our process. This was a very collaborative process and will continue to be collaborative, and we're really grateful to the vestry committee and to all the people that we worked with and talked to. We talked to kitchen users, we talked to music users. We got a lot of feedback through the vestry committee. So that's what really has shaped all this. And again, we would continue to want to do that. This needs to be a project. This needs to be a space that's about the community that uses it. We did a lot of kind of analysis and study investigation. I borrowed this diagram from Dave Miano, who did this, just really thinking about, how do people come into the piazza and the campus as a whole. This is a very strong orienting element that helps you know where you are, but to get from here to here is not clear, and there's not really an inviting way to do that. People come in through here, materials come in through here. There's a couple of different corridors that can get you to Cathedral Hall. There's this existing back stair, which really feels like a back of house space. Could be a circulation space with some architectural intervention. There's the cloister here, which right now is a really fine piece of architecture, beautiful stone, timber framing, but not very inviting, sort of dark, low. If you were here, you wouldn't necessarily choose to go down there and see what's down there. I'm just sharing a few of dozens of iterations of, playing with different types of circulation and how we could maybe add circulation in different ways. Some of these ended up, this is a lot of circulation in that version, kind of redundant, but, just things that we explored. Which leads us to where we are now, which is schematic design. And just to be clear, this is kind of at the initial stage of design. So, we're going to see ideas here. It doesn't mean that that's exactly what things will look like in the end. There's still more investigation to do. We need to work out details, and details sometimes inform larger design decisions. We're going to need to see what's behind some of the walls and so forth. So still a lot of design yet to do, but we have, I think, a pretty solid direction here. So I think everybody's familiar with Cathedral Hall and these spaces, but just to kind of orient you, so here's Cathedral Hall. Those lovely stained glass windows are here at this end. This is where the organ was, where the pipes and the pipe chase. This is the coffee service area off of Cathedral Hall, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about. The kitchen, the east cloister, and this is the little bell tower vestibule. So it's the bottom of the bell tower, the little room that you go into before you go into Cathedral Hall. A lot of that analysis we did, and just spending a lot of time walking through and being around the space, we realized that little vestibule is really the nexus of where it's sort of the crossroads to get to Cathedral Hall, and needs to be developed and celebrated and made into something that's inviting and makes you want to come down here and go to Cathedral Hall. This is looking at that entry from the south. So if we're standing here looking at that door. So this is the door as it is now. This is the original design. Sharon talked about the doors and paneling that came from the Briggs Mansion. This is one of those doors that came from the Briggs Mansion. So it's not the original door. This was the original design. And you still have these two windows from the doors. They're in the basement. And then there was a glass transom above. We would like to see something like this come back where you can actually see through the door. You actually look into Cathedral Hall instead of having a blank, dark door as you approach Cathedral Hall. Not that those aren't lovely doors. And just to be clear, anything that would be removed would be preserved. We're not talking about throwing anything away. But that door is one of the real challenges to getting to Cathedral Hall. Another kind of architectural challenge is this box in the bathroom box, because it's bathrooms up there, which was a necessary part of the work that was done here 20 years ago, but creates this big presence of a blank box there. And how do we deal with that? We know that's not going to go away. This is another elevation that Sharon found, which these are those original bifold doors she talked about. This is obviously the door to the kitchen. Well, it's not the door to the kitchen, actually. It's a false door because there's a concrete block wall behind that. But this is also from the Briggs Mansion. And then this was a window that was up higher on the wall beyond this originally. So how do we deal with that, and how do we maybe integrate that better into the rest of the architecture? These are just some of the challenges that we face, and some of this research really helps us figure out how to answer those challenges. So this is the plan that we're proposing at this point, the schematic plan, and I want to walk through it a little bit, and then we'll kind of zoom in to some of the different parts to see how it works. So we'd like to really develop this cloister hallway, and we want to do so, again, being sensitive to the quality of the architecture that's there and with the memory of what was originally there. But we want to make it so that if you're standing here and you look down there, that's an inviting path to take, right? And you know that there's a significant destination at the end of that. So we're talking about a few new finishes, some improvements to the windows, lighting especially there. Some of those finishes may continue into this stair. I think with some new finishes, lighting, and other kind of sensitive interventions, but not a lot of architectural changes, this stair could become a much more usable public stair. One thing that's interesting is, there's doors at either end of this stair. This door opening is actually much larger than the door that's there, we'd like to restore that full opening. And you found that there was a transom window there, which you found also, which you still have. You guys have done a great job of preserving a lot of your architectural artifacts. So if these could be larger, glassy doors with good lighting and nicer finishes in there, this might be a really logical, inviting place. Yeah.
Where do those stairs go? When you go up the stairs, where do they go?
So they go to the offices and classrooms above here. Yeah.
The children's programs are upstairs, and then the highest level has apartments. They used to have apartments for different people through the years. So,
and it.
Sorry, is the apartment? Is that where the children's spaces are now? That was once an apartment. Oh, it's higher. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't realize.
One of your rectors did for a while, but his wife passed away. The church decided he should live here. So.
We're recording this, so when you make a comment, can you?
I was just going to say that it's the youth space that the apartments used to be in the Sunday school area. Then there is an attic above that, but that's where some of the HVAC is right now.
and there's a bathroom that has a string.
To ring the bell.
Huh.
And the tower.
Yep. So, and it goes down to the basement, which is largely unfinished. There's a boiler room, full open basement here. There used to be some restrooms and a little classroom called the Tango Room, I think, down there.
We found a rendering that shows just Carriage House and Cathedral Hall.
Here, why don't you take this one? And then you can set this. Yeah.
We found a rendering, and I've shared it with the vestry. I'm sure they could put it on your website or share it with the congregation. But it shows the buildings as they existed independently before the cathedral was constructed. And it's fascinating to see the open cloisters, to understand the architecture ahead of all the other buildings on campus. And then Mather Hall was built after that.
You hang on to that one. We're thinking a lot about the approach and how you enter Cathedral Hall. And of all of this investigation, one of the big takeaways, one of the big learnings was making Cathedral Hall more inviting and more usable isn't so much about transforming Cathedral Hall. It's all the stuff around it. It's the back of house spaces. It's the corridors. I mean, there are improvements to do in lighting and a couple of things like that. But, it really just needs a light touch. What really is more important is all that, all the things around it. So this is under, from this line here, that's under that bathroom box. That actually gives us an architectural opportunity to create sort of an antechamber, or sometimes we've been calling it a narthex, a pre-function space. So you go in here, maybe you're gathering, maybe chit-chatting before you go into the main space. This could also be a space for food service. We'll look a little bit more at the kitchen. There's some flexibility there. This, which is currently the coffee service, we'd like to relocate the coffee service to a little bit more central location in the kitchen and transform that space, which we'll talk about in a minute. In the main Cathedral Hall, the biggest, most important thing we're probably doing here is adding the appropriate HVAC. Luckily, we have a full basement there. We can put, and it's dry, we can put an air handling unit there, serve it with air conditioning and heat throughout the hall from underneath, so we don't need to go overhead. We can get air down there, and so that's something that you won't really see, but will obviously make a big difference in comfort and usability. We talked a little bit about storage. We have an opportunity here where that organ encasement is to put a lift. So the tables and chairs can easily be brought to the lift and stored underneath. We don't need to have tables and chairs stored in much more highly valuable public spaces on the first floor. A little bit of a change to the stage area right now. There's sort of a two-level stage. There's a couple steps up and a big stage, and then it steps up further. We're removing the lower stage so that there's more floor space, keeping the upper stage So you could have lectures, musical performances, services, weddings, whatever. But we're adding some larger riser steps there. So you could have a choir or something standing on those risers. Like I said, some lighting improvements, but a pretty light touch in there. Now, to create this antechamber or pre-function space, we're talking about putting a wall in there. And we're going to take a look at what will that look like, because obviously that's important. I do want to talk about this garden room a little bit. This is a really potentially lovely little room. It serves an important function, which is coffee, and coffee is important to every church. But we can put that in another space that's a little more functional. And we don't need to have all the kitchen stuff going through that space. So this was originally the dean's office. It was a little library. This could be a great sitting room. It will have views out to the garden. We can imagine some nicer finishes, some more comfortable lighting, and seating in there. Could be consultations. Could be, if there's a wedding reception, it could be the bride's room. It could be musicians getting ready there. But just a lovely little contemplative space. So let's take a view. The next slide is going to be a view sort of out here looking back at the east end with that new wall. So the top half of this is the bathroom box. So we're completing that wall. We'd like to replicate the historic. Is that on the next slide? No. We'd like to replicate that historic window that was up higher and farther back that Sharon had found. Continue the wainscot paneling and integrate this into these hammer beam arches so that it really feels like it belongs. One thing that's not really shown here, I mentioned acoustics is a concern. We did a deep dive in that, which I won't totally go into, but we imagine that there might be some sound-absorbing material on the upper portion of this.
Carter, just since I'm seeing this for the second time, I'm noticing the gentleman in blue in the middle has a lot of extra gray in his tent.
Well, that's Fred Rogers. And we think he would. He was an Episcopal minister, I think. Yeah. So Presbyterian. Oh, sorry. Nevertheless.
My wife is a Presbyterian minister, so we know who's who.
Okay. No, I just noticed that the guy in the rendering kind of looked like him. So, so that's kind of the idea there, and also you can just kind of see sneaking through there. There's some idea of replicating, and again, it may not be exactly literal, but some idea of replicating the notion of those doors that had the window lights in them that you see the light through. Looking the other way, the west end, not too much really changes architecturally. One of the main differences would be some uplighting here. This is a really grand and tall and capacious space, but it doesn't quite feel that way. It feels kind of heavy, and I think it's a big part of that is because it's just dark up there. And you can't see all of the articulation of those beautiful trusses. So we would be like to illuminate the planes of the roof, make that feel a little lighter, and then the trusses would be a little bit more in relief. So that would be a nice augmentation. One thing that we'll get to here in a minute, we're showing a very glassy door there. We don't know if that's exactly what it would end up being. That's obviously a very specific choice. And part of that is we want to increase that connection to the garden. So we want to have the light and the visibility going through there. We'll talk, like I said, more about that in a minute. We were asked to look at some different seating layouts. So with round tables of 6, you could easily have 132 for some event with food. Food service here could be done in a couple different ways. If it's something where there's waiters or servers, they could come in and pick up food out here. You could also move these serving tables out into the narthex or even out into the main area. If you had, Apollo's Fire or some performance here, easily seating for 150 to 200 people. A place at the table. about 66 people seems to be about what they need. And again, we could bring the serving out here. People could self-serve at the buffet. Or another buffet option might be to have it in the middle. That might be nice for a wedding reception or something like that. So let's take a closer look at this cloister hallway, which we'd like to make more inviting. One of the things, the floor in there, part of it's stone, part of it's concrete. It's a little uneven. We're envisioning some nicer finished floor, maybe a porcelain tile, something like that would, be compatible with the rest of the architecture. This, as I think you mentioned, this arcade here was originally open. It was open air. This was an exterior space. We don't want to do that because, we want to have, interior circulation. But those white wood-framed infill windows, which are not original and not historically compatible, I think, with the rest of the architecture, we'd remove those and put in something much more glassy and thermally efficient, so you really feel like it's more connected to the outside. Lighting will be really important. We have the beautiful stone wall. Get some light on that so you see the relief in the shadow, maybe some uplighting, little pendants giving some light on the floor, just to make the whole space feel a little more inviting. Here's that original drawing showing the exterior arcade. Here's the way it is now. Again, I just love these really robust arches and everything, but we need to treat that in a way that's more inviting, like I said. This is just a rendering of how that might look. One of the interesting things here is there's I don't know if you can see the dotted line, but there's that skylight here, right? So this is the brightest spot in the hallway. So you're going from the brightest spot to the darkest spot in the hallway, which never feels good, right? So we want to make sure that destination, that little vestibule, is well illuminated. We imagine that there might be some sort of feature, maybe it's historic, I don't know, feature pendant light there, some uplighting in there. Get light on this wall, get light up here, some little pendants. Restore those windows that Sharon mentioned into the chapter room. We really want that chapter room to be a little bit more prominent, you know that it's there. So that would be kind of an initial idea of an approach to that hallway to really welcome you down that hallway. The kitchen design process, we went through a lot of iterations on this. We talked to kitchen users. We talked about how much kind of kitchen service is really needed and warranted. Is it just a warming kitchen where caterers bring stuff in? We considered that. We don't think that's the right solution, but actually making food there, we think will continue to be a part of how it operates. You have the vent hood over the stove, right? Already you have that. That's one of the biggest hurdles to creating a commercial kitchen. So we want to take advantage of that. And we worked with a kitchen expert on this, and we would continue to bring a kitchen expert on as part of the continuing design process. I'm not going to go through all the functionality of the sequence of operations here. We have considered that, and I'd be happy to discuss it afterwards. But we clarified the circulation through here, which right now is a little bit of a labyrinth. We added 2 ADA accessible bathrooms, which I think is really important. When you have functions here with a lot of people, you have good restrooms, but they're not close. They're over here. Having something that's accessible and close for those patrons is really important. And if we turn this stair into more of a front-of-house public thoroughfare, it'll be more obvious where they are. Flower Guild has their own area, so you don't need to put flowers in with the food. And we could talk about, if you have foxglove or something poisonous, you might want to put it with the food. Lily of the Valley would not be good. But different options in terms of food service in and out. Obviously, these are new doors here. We would be removing a portion of that concrete block wall so that we could have that. And I mentioned the connectivity to the garden, right? I think that's really important. I think everybody felt that. And so this was a little bit beyond the initial assignment, but we really felt we had to look at it.
It's extra credit.
It's extra credit. That's right. We can't just look at this in isolation, because that's the whole crux of the problem, right? Is because it feels like it's in isolation now, and we want to solve that. So we actually spent some time looking at some different things at the cloister garden, and we looked at the whole Mather garden. What could that be? And I think there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot to investigate. I mean, this whole garden could really be almost more like a park. And I recognize there's security concerns and a lot of other things that have to go into that. And we would bring in if that part were to move forward at some point, we would bring in a landscape architect with urban park experience and do that appropriately. But there's a real opportunity right in front of us here. If you're at the parking lot right now and you get out of your car or whatever, you look around, there's no way you would think about going down there, right? All there is a dumpster and a ramp and a fire escape, a rickety fire escape. So one thing is, first of all, we don't know what's going to happen to Mather Hall. That's a whole big question, and it's a very important question. But again, not part of this study right now. But whatever happens to Mather Hall, that fire escape has to go. It's never going to be a fire escape again, right? It's intrinsically unsafe and doesn't meet code, and we don't want people going on a fire escape. So let's get rid of it. The dumpster needs to be somewhere, but why does it need to be right there? And it does. It should be near the kitchen, obviously, and we should talk to your dumpster service people. Where we're suggesting it might be worth losing a parking space for that. We'll see. That's not quite solved, but there's an opportunity there. And this ramp should be reconfigured to be more usable. I understand sometimes food comes in all the way around here because this isn't very convenient. If we can do that, we can open this up and turn this from a barrier into a portal into the campus, right? You can imagine an event here after hours that's sort of a standalone event, and everyone comes down here to the garden into a new vestibule. If you're going to use this door, you really need to have a vestibule there for weather control. Also, as we learned, this door is actually an interior door. And that's one of the reasons it's not holding up very well. You can keep maintaining that at great expense, but it'll never keep the cold out. So let's put a modern but well-performing door here, a little vestibule. We're imagining, adding something onto something like Cathedral Hall is a sensitive thing. We're imagining something that's very minimal, very glassy. You see through it. Maybe it has large dimension wood framing, sort of a mini version of what's in Cathedral Hall, but not a literal replication. We'll take a look at that in a second. And there's a gathering space when you come out and come down, right? So it receives you. You can imagine another place before or after an event where people are sort of mingling about and talking. And then this space just to the west, this is where that bump out is for the organ. It really wants to be something, right? It's just begging to be developed as a space. We're showing some seating that maybe you could have, worship there or something. Yeah, maybe it's seating like that, maybe it's something else, but it really wants to be an outdoor space. Here, this is that space. And there's a couple benches there, which maybe that's the kernel of an idea, just a nice grassy sitting area, but needs some development and could be another special place on campus. Here's just a little closer view of this. We would have ADA accessibility there, which is really important. And we want to, this may not be the final configuration of a ramp, but we want to make sure we have that, and we're considering it. This is the current Briggs door, and this is the original elevation, which I think, as Sharon mentioned, there was originally not a door here. It was just another set of windows. This is a 3D view. I will say this is still in development. We were actually just talking this morning about, this handrail looks really sort of prominent and industrial and off the shelf, and we would obviously give that much more consideration in terms of a good design. And I think this is not quite as transparent as it would actually look. There would be more light inside. You're able to see through. And we don't know what the final colors will be. But the idea is that there's this very simple entry box that's deferential to the architecture around it, but provides that transition. And also, when you go through this portal, you see that as an entry, and it directs you where to go. So really emphasizing that connection.
Is the portal in the... I'm sorry. This may just be perspective of that rendering. Is the portal in the exact same place where the current
Yes.
misplaced interior door is?
So this is where that interior door is from the Briggs mansion. So we would use the same opening.
Got it. Thank you.
It's there. Yep. And also, you may not be able to see it from where you're sitting, but you would be able to see the wood framing in there. So it has that warmth of material.
It's a historically compatible addition. You never want to take away from the historic architecture. You want to be sympathetic to it. And this does that by differentiating from the old with new, but still being able to be transparent and understand and appreciate the architecture behind it.
And I will just say as an aside, anything we do on the exterior is going to go to the Landmarks Commission. This is very appropriately a Cleveland landmark. And as a former member of the Landmarks Commission, I can tell you, they're going to be very scrupulous about what they allow. I think this is something that they would very much support. So, but they're, we'll be very mindful of that. Yes.
Your rendering is very devoid of trees.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the presumption is that some of those old oaks would be gone.
Let's talk about.
Yes. I said the rendering appears to be very devoid of trees, and I'm just wondering if the presumption is that some of the old trees will be gone.
So we're going to add. We just haven't added a lot of the greenery to the rendering yet. We don't want to chop down all the trees, just to be clear. I will say some of the sycamores that are out there look like they're in pretty bad shape, and we've recommended getting an arborist out to look at those. We want to have a tree preservation plan, and we want to design around the trees that we think are keepable, because you don't just get a 40-inch diameter oak tree off the shelf. So
there are a few close to the chapel though that would need to come down because we are concerned roots will impact your masonry if they haven't already.
But we would also, once we figure out what trees are staying, what trees need to go, then we'll have a planting plan for trees that will grow in the future too, and also perennials and everything else. So. Yes.
There's been talk about doing like a kind of native plant garden kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Have you taken that into account at all?
I think that's a great idea. We're not at that point yet. When we move further into design, like I said, we get a landscape architect, and we would want to get a sense from you all of what kind of garden do you want? Do you want the whole thing to be native planting? Do you want a native planting section? Is there I know there's interest in a labyrinth, which I think is a cool idea, but I think that's a great idea.
I've encouraged the vestry to consider a strategic partnership with the Botanical Garden, Holden Arboretum, because Elizabeth Ring Mather was the first president for the Garden Club of Cleveland, and that's the precursor to the Botanical Gardens. So why not use your history? And the name of the garden is coincidentally named after her passing. She used to tinker in the garden all the time before her passing. So
and Holden / the Botanical Garden have a big urban tree initiative.
Right.
So that would be good.
Feels like a natural fit.
So that's pretty much all I have. I'm really happy to entertain questions and other thoughts.
Does your plan include keeping some of the kitchen equipment that we have now that's very costly?
Yeah, it's a good question. We would like to reuse as much as is reasonable because, as you say, kitchen equipment is very expensive. Right now, we're working on pricing this. So schematic design is a good time to kind of stop and say, okay, if we make some assumptions, what do we think this costs? And we're actively working on that portion of this right now. In that costing, we're assuming all new equipment except for the ventilation hood, because that's the worst case scenario. But when we move into design development, which would be the next phase, and we bring in a kitchen equipment expert, we'll get advice on what we can keep and what we will need to replace.
Carter, have your folks taken time to actually go in when Sunday lunch is being served in Cathedral Hall? Because that is a function that happens every week.
You mean a place at the table?
A place at the
yeah,
table,
we've
yes.
been there for a place at the table. Actually, the first town hall we did, it ended as a place at the table was starting, so we were able to kind of just see how that worked a little bit.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And make it part of the stakeholder groups.
I noticed you didn't say anything about the chapter room. Are you still thinking about those two outdoor windows?
Yeah, so we would like to. The only thing in this scope that we're really considering as part of this project would be replacing those windows or replacing the casings there with windows so you can see into it. We've also talked about potentially replacing the two doors with doors that have windows in the doors so you can see in. There are some ahistoric cases in there that might be replaced. I think there's another opportunity in the chapter room. It's a different project. Yeah.
We're going to have to stop having bishops now.
Have you considered the slate roof, or was that not part of this?
So the Cathedral Hall and much of your facility has a beautiful slate roof. We haven't really done an evaluation of it. Just looking at it, it looks like it's in pretty good condition, has been pretty well maintained. I think it should be maintained, but I don't think that would be that's more of a maintenance than a capital improvement project. But yeah, it's a good roof.
Speaking of maintenance, I would assume that the wood in the ceiling would need to be cleaned and perhaps repaired appropriately. Is that something your group does?
We could do that as part of this project, or it could be done separately depending on how the church wants to do that. Yes, it should be cleaned. There are some, not significant, but there are some repairs that need to be done where things have been drilled through it and so forth. I would also say you should clean the outside for sure. That's, again, something that could be part of this project. It's not currently priced as part of this project, but it could be its own project. I will just say that people have done a lot of damage to old buildings trying to clean them, so just Dave knows all about this, but just make sure you're working with a building restoration expert when you do that.
The vestibule, the proposed vestibule, how much footprint, are you gaining enough footprint by reducing the size of the stage at the other end of the hall to make up for the vestibule?
Yeah, so the vestibule is all on the outside, so it's not taking any footprint inside Cathedral Hall.
At all?
Right.
Okay.
You're utilizing the same door opening that the garden door is in now, and we're just building to the outside.
I see.
Off the cloister.
I'm sorry. It's a pretty close offset. I don't know exactly, but it's very close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a quick question about the kitchen area. Are you looking at replacing the walk-in refrigeration unit?
Yes, that would be part of this. Those tend to be built in place. Let me see if I have a good. Where am I? This will do. So right now you have the walk-in cooler and then the walk-in freezer is off of that, and they back up against this wall, which in laying out the kitchen is just it's sort of the worst possible place for them. And you know, figuring out right now we're showing this is the walk-in cooler. We don't know if that's exactly the right size. It could be that one thing with walk-in coolers is there's a walking path in there. So you're building and cooling a space that isn't doing anything, right? So it may be that we can go to one or two reach-in coolers. That's all going to depend on learning more about the quantity of food volume that goes through.
Carter, I think the prior question about the vestibule might have been directed towards the pre-function space, the narthex. So where that wall comes down from the bathroom box, you're kind of separating that space, not completely, but giving it another use. But that space that's separated now is more than gained when we take the lower level stage away at the other end of the hall.
Yeah.
Is that what you were referring to, Evie?
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what that offset is, but yeah.
What can we currently fit in round tables seating today? We have 132 on the
Yeah.
new one.
I don't know exactly. Does anyone?
15 rounds?
So times 6. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could. We put 6 at these. You could put 8 at these tables. So, yeah. So there's 19 tables shown here.
I believe that we're actually seeing increased capacity for all potential events through these plans. That's why we made them go through. Thank you. All these different configurations, and there have been a lot of them, kind of a dizzying. I also want to give a shout out to Dave Miano, who has been a yeoman of ushering and translating our concerns to this team, and just his level of detail and understanding about how we move through the space and how we're considering it. So thank you, Dave.
I'm wondering if there's any way that you could share Sharon's historical information with us in some kind of format that we could make available to the congregation, because it's fascinating history. Thank you so much.
You actually already have it. I've just read the books that John has provided. So I've digitized 2 of them, and I've sent links to Cynthia, and I think there should be a Trinity Summer Reading Club, honestly. But there's 3 books, and I've got 2 digitized. I'm working on the 3rd. Eventually, I'd love to get all 3 of them.
Thank you.
They're fascinating.
And we're going to do another forum. Sharon.
I'm going to geek out with the docents, and everyone's going to know everything.
So what's next?
Well, we would love to move into design development and construction drawings and do this. And I know that really depends on, fundraising and getting everyone on board and all the other things, and getting the diocese buy-in and everything, which we're happy to help with in whatever capacity. But there's this. We've identified a discrete standalone project here, which we could execute. But there's a lot of other things to consider in the campus as a whole. We alluded to Mather Hall and so forth. I guess the answer to your question is, it's not exactly for me to answer. It's for you all to answer.
And I can give a little bit more of a response to that. This has been the culmination of one of many steps as we have discerned what projects and what needs are in front of us, part of a larger conversation around everything from windows to endowment to some other less major initiatives. And now there's sort of 2 tracks for us as a cathedral. One is for our team, our capital campaign team, which has been meeting for 6 or 8 months, which is just the beginning, to begin to take this information along with other threads and to begin to pull them together and to present a case and a rationale and a sense of what our overall scope is. That also includes feasibility work, which we're doing, financial feasibility work. At the same time, this is a project that the vestry needs to be well aware of. And so we're going to hear from them. The vestry will hear from Marous Brothers in just a few weeks, very much to kind of get this update. Each time we meet, and there are some revisions as they've been really responsive to our feedback, and we're really grateful for that. And so we'll take a closer look at timelines and costs, and so that we as a congregation and through the work of the vestry can make the decision about what level, are we ready to go with this, at what level, what are the needs. So that's kind of, and from there, I don't know what the next step from there is. So other than beginning to figure out where we're headed, are we what is our what will the timeline be from there? Lynette. What would a timeline look like if from a launch date, so to speak? What would a very rough timeline look like?
So I will say we have a meeting with the vestry committee this Wednesday, and we're going to be doing we've talked about it sort of cursorily, but we're going to be doing a deeper dive into costs and schedule for this. And I actually have a meeting with our scheduler tomorrow. So it's a little premature to be too specific, but if we got the green light to do this project, I'm understanding there's a lot of other things that affect it. And if we just look at this as a project, I think we're looking at, 16 months or so of design and construction. But, we're going to get a lot more specific about that.
And just to clarify, that meeting on Wednesday is with our design team.
Right, that's
and
not
then vestry is in 3 weeks.
That's on the 16th.
Yeah,
right.
I saw some vestry antenna go up.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mimi.
Thank you. I have a question in terms of the contractors that you generally work with, and I'm just going to shoot straight to the hip about how diverse that is. Given the history overall, since you talked about in 1895, there probably weren't many people that looked like me here in the congregation, and the congregation has really changed over time. So wanting to feel that this is a place that where all are welcome, not just in terms of worshiping, but also participating in building the future of building.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So when we get this to a certain point in design where we're ready to, we will lay all this out together with the design committee and everything. What's the design schedule, and at what point do we say, okay, here's our promised price, right? It won't be more than this. When we do that, we're talking to a lot of different subcontractors. We work with a lot of owners, civic, county, city, that have the same concerns, and some of which have legal obligations for minority, women-owned business participation. So we're very connected to a lot of diverse subcontractors, and we're very used to meeting owners' goals as far as that goes. We would be happy to have that conversation if you have specific goals you want to make. We also do mentorship for some smaller and kind of startup minority contractors. It's very much part of our culture. So the answer is yes. Let's figure out what the goals are and how we achieve them.
We have a project that we just started pre-development on in the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood, and our compliance manager was there last week. We did an outreach activity with the community. We weren't there passing out Marous Brothers brochures. We were there passing out water bottles and popsicles to the community, working with the local church. And as a contractor, we want people to know that we're a contractor who cares, because we are a hometown builder. So, we do that. And she was there for a resume clinic to work with people who are interested in joining the trades. So, we want to have a larger, broader conversation to engage as many people as we can.
Yeah, we have a full-time compliance officer in-house who makes sure we're meeting whatever goals we said we'd meet.
and I want to be transparent about our overall process. There was an elaborate conversation and discernment process that brought us into relationship with Marous Brothers, which means we were in conversation with a number of architectural firms, and in each case, that was part of our own discernment, was to ask that very question. So, thank you for bringing it up, Mimi. The last time we did this an hour ago, I meant to say, you guys keep meeting. I have to go to church. But as soon as I said it, like, everybody ran. It's like I rang the bell wrong. So I hope we didn't miss any more questions. But I'm sensing we're winding down. But if you have more questions, just go ahead and let us know, and there'll be a minute or two afterwards. But I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Carter and Sharon and Doug and their whole firm, not only for this work, but you can kind of tell the enthusiasm they have for this place, and just this is not just a building. I mean, it's never just a building, but there is deep history. There are so many people who, over the decades, even centuries, have made this place what it is, and this is a process that's helping to honor that and really kind of explore who we are, so that we can be who we're called to be today and 25 years from now and 100 years from now. And I sense that throughout the whole process.
Can I tell a corny little anecdote?
I hope you will.
So I first was in awe of this place when I came here in 1985, and my mom brought me here for a concert, and it was Johann Sebastian Bach's 300th birthday celebration concert. And I remember exactly where I sat in the nave, and it was first of all, it was an amazing concert. This was before Apollo's Fire was around, but there's this little Baroque orchestra, and if you remember PDQ Bach, who used to do, they did the first half was serious, and then the second half they did PDQ Bach, and there was a guy dressed up as Bach, and if I could go back and tell, I would have been 14, I guess, go back and tell my 14-year-old self, someday you're going to work on this building, So,
Eric.
Doug, you got anything to say?
I should say what you're seeing up here is really Doug's work. So,
with the kitchen stuff.
Yeah.
No, Carter and Sharon tell it well. I'm not the public speaker that they can be, but a lot of the information. I mean, it's a team effort between everyone here in our office, especially Sharon, Carter, and I, to do all these things. And there's still more work to do. So none of this stuff is set in stone, like Carter, Sharon said. It's schematic design, a lot of work, a lot of details to look at, and hopefully we'll get the charge to do the next step. And love working with Dave. Dave's been really great help with us, and sitting down. We've had a lot of side conversations and emails and sharing plans. And I mean, this is only a small amount of the information that we've generated. Seating arrangements, kitchen layouts, just different ideas. So, but this is the direction that it's taking us, and we're not, we didn't come in here with some preconceived notion of this is how it has to be. This is how we want it to be. It's working with everyone to develop this. So, it's really exciting. I mean, I might not look like I'm excited and everything about it, but for me, it's when I'm in the office working on everything. That's when it really shows. So, yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
And thank you all for being here. And this is this first session, packed the house. Second session, pretty darn close, pretty amazing for late summer. So this is obviously important to us. And so thank you to our friends from Marous.